I didn't get caught cheating. I found out later I was being tested and I failed in the one way no one saw coming. I'm not writing this to justify myself. I'm writing it because once you start living two lives, silence becomes heavier than guilt. From the outside, my life looked simple. Stable job, long-term girlfriend, no scandals, no chaos. I was the kind of guy people described as solid, which I always took as a compliment. 31 years old, logistics manager for a regional freight company, predictable schedule, predictable routines, gym before work, meal prep on Sundays, quiet nights during the week. Then there was her. We'd been together a little over 2 years, not married, but serious enough that people assumed we were heading there. I loved her in a quiet way, the kind of love that doesn't announce itself but shows up consistently. I planned my time around her. I listened, I adjusted. I never gave her a reason not to trust me. At least, I thought I hadn't. Looking back, the warning signs were there, but they were subtle. Questions that sounded innocent but landed strangely. Did I ever miss being single? Would I tell her if someone flirted with me? Did I believe people were only as faithful as their options? I answered honestly every time. No hesitation, no games. And every time, she'd nod like she was storing the information instead of accepting it. Her best friend was always around. Too around. I never disliked her outright. She was charismatic, confident, the type who could walk into a room and command attention without raising her voice. She also had opinions about men, about relationships, about loyalty. I told myself it was just protectiveness. Best friends do that, right? The first time she crossed the line, I almost missed it. One night, my girlfriend went out with coworkers. Late night, I stayed home, half watching TV, half dozing. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was her friend, asking if I was awake. I hesitated before replying, assuming something had gone wrong. She said she'd left early and didn't want to go home. Asked if she could stop by. I should have said no. Instead, I said fine, telling myself I was being decent, not reckless. When she arrived, everything felt off immediately. Too dressed up, too comfortable, too familiar. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. She talked about stress, about feeling overlooked, about how hard it was watching my girlfriend settle for someone safe. That word stuck with me. At one point, she asked whether I thought loyalty was a choice or just circumstance. I told her it was a choice. I meant it. She moved closer. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. I stood up and told her it wasn't appropriate, said she should leave. She smiled like she'd expected that answer and walked out without arguing. Before leaving, she said something I didn't understand until much later. I should probably tell her you handled this well. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I told my girlfriend what happened. I expected shock, anger, something. Instead, she looked relieved, almost proud. She thanked me for telling her and moved on like nothing happened. That's when I should have walked. Instead, I stayed. Because relationships aren't built on single moments, they're built on patterns. And I convinced myself this was just a weird one-off. A month later, her friend contacted me again. Different number. Apologized. Asked to talk somewhere public. I agreed, against my better judgment, because I wanted answers. Over coffee, she finally told me the truth. My girlfriend had asked her to test me. Not as a joke, not casually, deliberately. She wanted to know if I'd cheat if given the chance. She didn't trust reassurance. She didn't trust words. She wanted proof. I felt humiliated, angry, strangely hollow. I left without finishing my drink and drove home, rehearsing what I'd say when I confronted my girlfriend. I told myself this was it. Either we talked honestly or it ended. Then my phone buzzed, a photo, her friend again, smiling into the camera. You passed the first test, don't mess up the next one. That's when I understood something far worse. This wasn't over. This wasn't a test anymore. It was a setup. And I had no idea yet how badly I was going to fail or how impossible it would become to tell the truth once I did. I didn't confront her right away. That's the part people always judge hardest when I tell this story. They assume I froze, or I was afraid, or I was already tempted. The truth is less dramatic and more uncomfortable. I needed time to understand what I was dealing with. Being tested changes the ground under your feet. It reframes every past conversation, every look, every random question. Once you realize someone is measuring you instead of trusting you, you stop reacting emotionally and start observing. And what I observed was this. She wasn't trying to catch me cheating. She was trying to prove something she already believed. The days after that message felt surreal. On the surface, nothing changed. She texted me like normal, asked about my day, sent memes, talked about weekend plans. But now I noticed things I hadn't before. How she watched my reactions more than she listened to my answers. How she casually mentioned other men flirting with her, then waited to see if I got jealous. How she'd ask questions, then circle back to them days later to see if my answers stayed consistent. It wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. I told myself I'd talk to her when I was calm, when I had the words, when I understood whether this was fear, insecurity, or something darker. Then the second test started. It didn't come with a warning. Her friend didn't announce it. She just appeared again. Not at my place this time, at my life. It started with a message that didn't feel threatening at all, just casual, friendly, almost respectful. She said she knew she'd crossed the line before, said she wanted to clear the air, said she didn't want things to be weird between us anymore. I ignored it. Then another message came a few days later. She mentioned she'd be at the same bar my coworkers liked, said if I happened to be there, maybe we could talk for 5 minutes. Public place, no drama. I still didn't respond. What finally got me wasn't persistence. It was timing. I'd had a bad week at work. One of those weeks where nothing technically goes wrong, but everything requires 10 extra steps. Delays, missed calls, clients who don't listen. By Friday night, my head felt like it was packed with static. My girlfriend had canceled our plans that night, said she was exhausted and needed a quiet evening alone. I believed her, or at least I told myself I did. I went out with coworkers instead, and that's where I saw her friend again. She didn't rush over, didn't make a scene, just caught my eye from across the room and raised her glass slightly, like a neutral acknowledgement. No pressure. I stayed with my group, told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong by being in the same room. Eventually, people drifted. Someone suggested another bar. Someone else went home. I ended up at the counter alone, waiting for my tab. That's when she sat down next to me. She didn't flirt, not at first. She talked about work, about stress, about how lonely it can feel being the person everyone relies on but no one really checks on. I didn't offer much, just nodded, gave short answers. At some point, she said something that hit harder than I expected. You ever feel like you're already guilty before you've done anything wrong? I looked at her then. She was watching me carefully, but not with that smug confidence from before. This time, there was something else there. Curiosity, yes, but also vulnerability, or at least a convincing imitation of it. I asked her what she meant. She said sometimes people decide who you are in their head, and no amount of honesty can change it. I didn't reply, because that was exactly how I'd been feeling for a week. We didn't touch, we didn't cross any obvious lines. When she left, she said goodnight and walked away without looking back. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. Over the next couple of weeks, she kept finding ways into my orbit, always indirectly, always plausibly innocent. Group settings, coincidences, mutual friends, never alone, never overt. And every time, she was calm, patient, nothing like the caricature of a manipulator people imagine. She listened more than she talked, remembered details I hadn't realized I'd shared. She never spoke badly about my girlfriend. That's important. She never had to. The comparison did the work on its own. At home, my girlfriend felt distant. Not cold, just distracted. Like she was always somewhere else mentally. She'd ask how my night went, then half listen to the answer. She'd scroll her phone while we watched movies. She'd say she trusted me, then ask questions that suggested the opposite. I started feeling like I was auditioning for my own relationship. And the worst part was the resentment. Not loud resentment, quiet, corrosive resentment. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't lied. I hadn't given her a reason to doubt me. And yet here I was, being monitored, evaluated, tested. Her friend never pushed. She just waited. The night it happened wasn't dramatic. No alcohol-fueled mistake. No reckless passion. It was a slow erosion. We were alone for the first time when it shouldn't have mattered at all. A mutual friend had invited us both over. Plans changed. People canceled. Suddenly, it was just the two of us sitting in a living room, rain hitting the windows, takeout containers on the table. I remember thinking I should leave. I also remember thinking it wouldn't matter. We talked about childhood, about expectations, about how exhausting it is to be with someone who's always bracing for disappointment. At some point, she asked me, quietly, if I felt trusted. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said she could tell I loved my girlfriend. Said it was obvious in the way I defended her even when I was frustrated. Then she asked a question that finally cracked something open. Do you think love should feel like a test you're always afraid of failing? I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer scared me. What scared me more was how good it felt to be asked without judgment. The line was crossed without ceremony. No grand decision. just a moment where I didn't pull away. Afterward, there was silence. Not awkward, heavy. I remember staring at the ceiling and feeling two things at once: relief and dread. Relief that someone wanted me without conditions. Dread because I knew exactly what this meant. She didn't celebrate, didn't smirk, didn't act victorious. She just lay there quietly and said something that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. Now you know what it feels like to disappoint her. That's when I understood. This wasn't seduction, it was alignment. She stepped into the role my girlfriend had created. The proof that trust was impossible. I left shortly after. No promises, no discussion about what this meant. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, heart racing, but mind eerily clear. I didn't feel like a man who cheated because he wanted to. I felt like a man who'd been maneuvered into confirming someone else's belief. The next morning, I woke up next to my girlfriend. She curled closer to me in her sleep, peaceful, unaware. I felt sick, and yet when she woke up and asked how I was doing, I said I was fine, because the truth would destroy her, and because, despite everything, I still loved her. That was the moment my life split cleanly in two. One version where I was still the man she thought she knew, and another where her best friend now held a truth that could end everything with a single sentence. I didn't know yet that she wouldn't rush to tell. I didn't know yet that love, twisted the wrong way, can look a lot like leverage. I only knew one thing. I couldn't undo what I'd done, and I couldn't walk away without detonating everything around me. Not yet. I thought the hardest part would be living with the guilt. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing how easily guilt turns into routine if you give it structure. The days after it happened passed without incident. No confrontations, no confessions, no explosions. Life kept moving forward like it always had, which somehow made everything feel worse. I went to work, answered emails, cooked dinner, slept beside the woman I loved, and every normal moment felt counterfeit. Her friend didn't contact me right away. That silence was deliberate, I learned later. She didn't need to rush. She knew exactly what she had. When she finally reached out, it wasn't dramatic. She asked if I wanted to get coffee. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I could have said no, I should have said no, but avoidance felt like denial, and denial felt fragile. I agreed, telling myself this was about control, about understanding the situation before it spiraled. We met in the middle of the day, in a place with big windows and too much light for secrets. She acted normal, calm, friendly, almost gentle. She didn't bring up what happened right away. She asked about my job, about a project I'd mentioned weeks earlier. She remembered details I hadn't realized I'd shared. It made the conversation feel intimate in a way I didn't want. Eventually, she set her cup down and looked at me directly. She said she wasn't going to tell my girlfriend. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. She explained that she'd never planned to, that the test was supposed to end the moment I failed it, that my girlfriend wanted certainty, not spectacle. Then she paused and said something that made my chest tighten. But now things were complicated. She said she hadn't expected to feel anything, that she'd gone into it believing I'd either shut her down or treat it like a joke, that she hadn't expected me to look so tired, so lonely, so resigned. She said she saw herself in me. I didn't respond. I just listened, because interrupting felt dangerous. She told me she'd fallen in love with me, not dramatically, not tearfully, like it was a fact she discovered and accepted. I felt the floor tilt under me. I told her this couldn't happen again, told her I loved my girlfriend, told her what we did was a mistake. She nodded like she'd already accounted for that. She said she wasn't asking me to leave, wasn't asking me to choose, wasn't asking me for anything at all. Then she leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. She said she just needed me not to confess, because if I did, everything would come out. The test, the manipulation, her role in it. And my girlfriend would lose both her relationship and her closest friend in one blow. She said that would destroy her. That was the first time I felt trapped. Not by threats, not by anger, by responsibility. She framed it like mercy, like silence was the kinder option. I told her I needed space. She agreed easily, too easily. That night, I watched my girlfriend cook dinner and felt like I was watching someone through glass. She was humming softly, relaxed, unburdened. She trusted me again, or maybe she never stopped trusting the version of me she wanted to believe in. I started noticing how often her friend was around now, more than before, always in group settings, always polite, always careful not to cross visible lines. She never touched me in public, never flirted, never even looked at me too long. But sometimes, when my girlfriend wasn't looking, she'd meet my eyes and smile, and I'd feel my stomach knot. Weeks passed like that. The affair didn't continue physically, but it didn't end either. It lived in glances, in proximity, in shared knowledge. At home, my girlfriend seemed lighter, happier. The questions stopped. The monitoring faded. She'd say things like she felt silly for ever doubting me, that she knew I was different. Every time she said that, something in me twisted. I considered telling her the truth more than once, rehearsed it in my head, imagined the fallout. I imagined her face collapsing as the pieces aligned, the betrayal layered on betrayal. The realization that the test had created the very thing she feared. I couldn't do it. And I hated myself for that. The shift came the night her friends stopped pretending. We were all at a small get-together at my girlfriend's place. Wine, music, casual conversation. At some point, my girlfriend stepped out to take a call. Her friend moved closer to me on the couch. She didn't touch me, didn't whisper, just spoke normally, like anyone else in the room could hear. She said she missed me. I froze. She said she thought about me every day, that she knew I was pretending nothing happened, but that pretending didn't erase it. I told her, quietly, to stop. She smiled and said she would. Then she added something that made my blood run cold. She said if I ever decided honesty was the right move, I should let her know first, because she would need time to prepare. I asked her what that meant. She didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to my girlfriend, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. I realized then that I wasn't just keeping a secret. I was being managed. A few days later, she asked me to meet again. This time, she didn't pretend it was casual. She told me she loved me and that love doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. She said she understood I wasn't leaving my girlfriend, that she didn't expect me to. Then she told me what she did expect. She expected me to keep living as if nothing had happened. No confessions, no distance, no dramatic exits. Because if my girlfriend ever found out, she wouldn't just lose me, she'd lose her best friend. And that, she said calmly, would be unforgivable. That was the moment the blackmail became real, not explicit, not shouted, just implied. She wasn't threatening to expose me because she was angry. She was threatening because she believed she was protecting something. Her version of love, her version of stability. And I was the weak point holding it all together. I walked away from that conversation knowing one thing for certain. I wasn't just living a double life anymore. I was living inside someone else's leverage. And the longer I stayed silent, the more control I handed over. I still loved my girlfriend. That was the worst part, because love should make you brave. Instead, mine had made me complicit. I didn't plan the trip as an escape. At least, that's what I told myself. Work had been relentless, and I had unused vacation days piling up. A week off made sense on paper, a reset. Space to think without someone watching my face for reactions or weighing my silence for meaning. I told my girlfriend I needed to clear my head. She didn't question it. In fact, she encouraged it. Said I'd been tense lately. Said time away might do me good. She kissed me goodbye like everything was normal. That hurt more than anything. I went alone. Mountains, a small rental cabin, spotty cell service, long walks, early mornings, no distractions except my own thoughts. I expected guilt to follow me there. It did, but it was quieter, less sharp. For the first couple of days, I barely checked my phone. No messages from her friend, no pressure, no reminders. For the first time in months, I felt something close to calm. By day 3, the anger finally surfaced. Not explosive anger, focused anger. I thought about how absurd the situation was. I hadn't cheated out of desire or neglect. I'd been maneuvered, tested, then trapped by the outcome of that test. I thought about how trust, once replaced by suspicion, doesn't come back, it just changes shape. I asked myself hard questions I'd been avoiding. Why was I protecting a relationship that hadn't protected me? Why was I carrying the emotional weight of choices I didn't initiate? Why was silence starting to feel like consent? I didn't come to a conclusion, but something shifted. I stopped thinking about how to keep everything intact and started thinking about what it would cost me if I didn't. The night before I came back, my girlfriend texted me that she missed me, that she was proud of me for taking time for myself, that things would feel better when I got home. I almost believed her. When I walked into the apartment, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad, just different. A different shampoo, a candle I didn't recognize. Then I saw the extra shoes by the door. My chest tightened. I didn't need to ask. Her friend stepped out of the hallway like she belonged there, comfortable, relaxed, wearing one of my girlfriend's sweaters like it was the most natural thing in the world. She smiled when she saw me. My girlfriend followed behind her, mid-sentence, then froze. She explained quickly, too quickly, said it was temporary, said her friend was going through something. said it would only be for a few days. I nodded because arguing in that moment felt pointless, but inside, something cracked. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't coincidence. This was proximity turned into pressure. That night, lying in bed beside my girlfriend, I listened to the muffled sounds of her friend moving around the apartment. Cabinets opening, water running, the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how much space she was allowed to take. I realized then that the week away hadn't solved anything. It had only delayed the inevitable. And now I was back trapped in a place that no longer felt like mine, sharing silence with two people who knew different versions of the truth. I didn't sleep at all. By morning, one thought wouldn't leave me alone. This wasn't a triangle anymore. It was a cage. End of part 4. Part 4. I told my wife's friend that I couldn't take it anymore. Part 4 of 6, I can't do this anymore. I didn't plan the conversation. It happened because I ran out of places to put the feeling. The apartment had become unbearable in a way that was hard to explain without sounding dramatic. Nothing was overtly wrong. No arguments, no raised voices, just a constant sense of being watched from two directions at once. She stayed longer than a few days. My wife said her friend needed support, said it was temporary, said she didn't want to abandon someone who was clearly struggling. I nodded because disagreeing made me look cold, and I was already carrying too much quiet guilt to afford that. But the air changed. I'd come home from work and feel like a guest in my own place. Conversations would stop when I walked into a room. Not abruptly, just subtly, like I'd arrived a few seconds too early. At night, I'd lie next to my wife while listening to her friend move around the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room. Familiar with the space? Too familiar. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me when my wife wasn't looking, not smiling, just studying me, like she was waiting for something to give. What finally broke me wasn't a big moment. It was a small one. I was standing in the kitchen, early morning, making coffee before work. She walked in, barefoot, wearing one of my shirts. She didn't comment on it, didn't need to. She leaned against the counter and said quietly that this situation was hard on her too. That was it. I set the mug down before my hands started shaking. I told her I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse. I just said it plainly, that living like this was eating me alive, that the constant proximity, the silence, the pretending it was too much. She listened without interrupting. I told her I felt trapped, that every day felt like I was betraying someone no matter what I did, that I was exhausted from holding everything together while pretending nothing was wrong. She asked what I wanted. I said I wanted space, distance, for her to leave or for me to. She looked genuinely hurt. That surprised me more than anything. She said she never meant for it to get this far, that she thought staying close would make things easier, not harder, that she felt like she was losing me without ever really having me. I told her that was exactly the problem. I told her I still love my wife. Saying it out loud felt like a confession and a defense at the same time. She went quiet after that. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. She asked me what I thought would happen if I forced her to leave. I asked her what she meant. She said my wife would ask questions, that explanations would lead to conversations, that conversations would lead to truth. She didn't say it like a threat. She didn't have to. I told her I wasn't asking for permission, that this situation was destroying me and something had to change. She nodded slowly and said she understood. Then she said she just needed a little time. That was the moment I realized how deep this had gone. I had tried to draw a line, and somehow I was still standing on her side of it. That night, lying in bed beside my wife, I felt further away from her than I ever had. Not because I didn't love her, but because the life we were living no longer felt real. I kept thinking the same thought over and over, unable to silence it. If staying honest hurts everyone, and staying silent is killing me, what am I supposed to choose? And how much longer can I live like this before I disappear completely? I didn't wake up that morning planning to lie. I woke up with a familiar pressure in my chest, the kind that makes breathing feel like work. I lay there listening to my wife sleep beside me and realized I couldn't make it through another day pretending this was sustainable. Something had to break. I just didn't have the courage to let it be me. I waited until her friend left the apartment that afternoon, said she was meeting someone, would be back later. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise ever had. I sat across from my wife at the kitchen table. She asked if everything was okay. I told her no. The words came out steadier than I expected. I said I needed to talk about her friend, that it had been building for months, that I hadn't said anything because I didn't want to cause problems between them. She frowned, confused, but listened. I told her that her friend had been crossing boundaries for a long time, that it started with messages, then comments, Then moments where I felt cornered and uncomfortable. I said I tried to shut it down repeatedly, but she didn't stop. That part wasn't even entirely false. Then I crossed the line. I told her her friend had been threatening me. I said she told me that if I ever spoke up, she'd claim we were sleeping together, that she'd destroy our marriage out of spite. I watched my wife's face change as the story unfolded. Confusion gave way to shock. Shock hardened into anger. She asked why I hadn't told her sooner. I said I was afraid she wouldn't believe me, that I didn't want to hurt her, that I thought I could handle it on my own. Those lies slid out easier than the truth ever would have. When her friend came back, my wife confronted her immediately. No buildup, no soft entry, just raw fury. The argument was loud. Accusations flew. Voices cracked. I stood there, saying very little, watching two people tear each other apart over a version of events I'd carefully constructed. Her friend denied everything at first, laughed even, said I was twisting things. Then my wife mentioned the threat. That's when her friend looked at me. Not angry, not shocked, almost disappointed. She didn't deny it outright after that, just said my wife was choosing to believe a convenient story. Said I wasn't as innocent as I pretended to be. That was enough. My wife told her to pack her things and leave. Not tomorrow, not after talking it through. Now. Her friend argued, pleaded, then went cold. She grabbed her bag, said a few things designed to hurt, and walked out without looking back. The door slammed. And just like that, it was over. That night, my wife held me while I stared at the wall. She apologized for not seeing it sooner, for bringing her friend into our home, for putting me in that position. I told her it wasn't her fault. That was another lie. The days that followed were quieter, safer on the surface. My wife checked in on me more, made space, told me she trusted me completely. Every time she said that, something inside me twisted. I'd ended the nightmare, but I hadn't escaped it. I'd saved my marriage by poisoning it with a lie that could never be undone. I still love my wife. I believe that. I also knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I'd manipulated the truth. I'd chosen the version of reality that let me keep my life intact, at someone else's expense. Some nights, I tell myself I had no choice, that telling the full truth would have destroyed everything, that this was the lesser evil. Other nights, I wonder if I just proved everyone right, if I really was capable of betrayal when it mattered most. I lie awake listening to my wife breathe, wondering how long a life built on omission can last, wondering if love that survives only because of a lie deserves to survive at all. So here I am, asking the questions I can't answer on my own. What should I do now? Am I a bad person for choosing the lie that saved us? Or did I lose myself the moment I decided the truth was too expensive to tell?